How's it going, guys? It's Richard and welcome to another Evolution of Combat boss guide. Today it's going to be probably the hardest quest boss in the game, some people would consider, and that is Nomad. The footage in the background is going to be me taking on the double Nomad, but obviously the things you're going to be using are going to be identical to what you would have to do if you were killing him in the quest. Now, one thing to note is that basically you don't need anywhere near as much food to do the fight anymore, but it is essential that you use abilities and that you use a shield. You can't get away with using momentum. Now, first of all, we're going to get into talking about the various gear setups that you can do. I actually use melee in the fight, although I probably wouldn't recommend that in future because I seem to have really slow kills. So we're going to get on into the gear setups. So what we have here is the exact gear setup that I used when I was doing the fight this morning. A lot of these things I would recommend changing in the future, but these are just what I found when I was doing the fight, and I found them to be reasonably effective, obviously, as I did end up succeeding. A cape, you're going to want to do any form of cape which is good that gives you a melee critical bonus. This is if you're using melee. The fire cape 2.2 is quite nice, but equally you can use any form of skill cape which gives you a 2% bonus, which is quite nice. Amulet of Fury also gives you a 4.2% melee crit, which is quite nice. As far as I'm aware, there's no melee amulet that gives you a better crit than that. Weapon, Chaotic Rapier, obviously quite a good stab bonus. If you got anything similar, like a Karasi sword is also quite useful. Any form of decent weapon that you can obviously use in melee, just make sure it's one-handed, because you can't get away with using a two-handed weapon because you got to use your shield abilities. Gloves, pretty better off using something like Bando's gloves than these. These are just the sort of things that I'm used to using in the game. Now, the Tokuzo is a good one if you want to have a free piece of item that gives you a crit bonus, but equally you could use something like a Warrior's Ring, also gives you a nice crit, or a Berserker Ring still gives you 2% in every type of crit. Helm with Nitiznot, not really that effective anymore. You're probably better off using something like a Bando's War Shield, a Bando's Helm is more effective, and a Bando's Chestplate and Legs, obviously still reasonably effective. Faldor Shield, yeah, that was just the only shield I could really find in my bank in a hurry. Unfortunately, the Holy Books, on all the various God Books in fact, do not count as shields. They give you a crit bonus and various life point bonuses and things that like a lot of shields would also have, but for some reason it doesn't count as a shield. I assume probably because it's not actually that big as such. Several of the books don't actually count as that. Dragon Boots, once again not really the sort of thing I would recommend, but it's just the sort of stuff I had in my bank and that I'm used to using, so you could probably switch those out for something like Bando's boots would also be quite effective, and various other like sort of metal boots that you would find to be more effective than dragon boots. But whatever is suitable to your level would obviously be practical. You can use an aura if you like. I didn't really feel like it was necessary. I don't really have anything that is that practical in combat, so not really going to talk much about auras. If you're using magic, on the other hand, you're going to be wanting to use the god capes that you get from the mage arena in the north of the wilderness. These gives you a 2% magic crit bonus, which is pretty useful. Arcane Stream is a little bit better than Amulet of Fury, giving you a 4.9% crit. I personally think they should have given it a little bit more than that, but you know, I'm not the developers, they probably know best. You're gonna have to use a wand. You can't get away with using a stave because you need your shield, so a wand is what you use in the weapon slot. Various gloves and rings, but gloves, just those would equally work because it's a hybrid pair of gloves. Just any form of magic gloves like infinity gloves or anything like that, obviously quite useful. Ring, Seer's Ring will give you a crit bonus, but equally because this is a hybrid item, it will give you a magic crit as well, so whatever you like really for there. All of this armor you're going to want to do something like Ganodermics or Subjugation Robes, and for the shield it's basically, there's not really much in the way of choice for shields for mages, but I'll say the Ward of Subjugation is pretty practical because it gives you a 1k life point bonus and it also gives you a 1.4k armor bonus, which is pretty tasty. Range, similar sort of theme again, just the best range cape you can get a hold of. An Amulet of Ranging, quite useful. Got to use a crossbow or throwing because it has to be one-handed. Some form of gloves. Seer's Ring would also be useful there. Range, just general range armor like Armadale equipment would be quite useful. Like an Armadale buckler would also be very useful there. And Ranger boots if you've got the money, and a Robin hat if you've once again got that kind of cash. So now we're going to talk about which abilities to use. The setup here that I've got on this on this action bar are the abilities that I used throughout the fight. I actually removed Reflect halfway through the second fight because I realised that any damage doesn't actually get reflected back to Nomad. He seems to be immune from that effect, so that one is entirely useless, so I got rid of that one. In addition, Preparation, it basically reduces the cooldown of your resonance ability, which is something that I'll go over in a minute. But because you don't need to use resonance as often as basically as often as the cooldown is, you can completely get rid of that one as well and save these spots for any additional healing abilities or basic abilities for your combat style. Now I'm going to start talking over the shield abilities that you'll be using throughout the fight. Now anticipation is something that you should activate as your first ability when you go into a fight. Essentially it removes 10% damage and removes you from getting and provides immunity from getting stunned. You can't get stunned throughout the fight, so that part is irrelevant, but the 10% damage reduction is quite nice because it means you get to eat less and obviously use your abilities less often. Resonance effectively changes any damage that you would have received in the following attack within the next 6 seconds and changes it into healing, which is incredibly powerful for one of his attacks that I'll go over later. These next 5 slots, just fill them with the abilities that you would use for your particular combat style. So obviously I was just using things like Slice, Sever and Dismember for attacking Nomad. I'd recommend maybe throwing in a threshold ability or 2 threshold abilities, so you just speed up the fight a little bit, cause a little bit of extra damage, or effects that you might find practical. So that's entirely down to you what you use there. Now these next few, Debilitate, I believe it's pronounced. I'm trying to get that right. It basically does your 100% weapon damage, but then at the same time it also reduces any damage you get dealt for the next 10 seconds, so that's pretty useful, especially if it's on one of his special attacks, although I highly doubt you'll be using that because you'd probably be using Resonance. And Barricade is something you might use during his Berserker phase because it gives you complete immunity for 10 seconds, which is a pretty nice thing to use. And finally Rejuvenate. Rejuvenate is really useful. Although it has a 60-second cooldown, it restores 40% of your life points over 10 seconds and also boosts any stats, but obviously you're not going to have any stats reduced, so that's not a huge issue. So that one is incredibly useful. But with all of these defensive abilities that I'm talking about, you do need a shield, so you're going to have to go into the fight with a shield. And obviously on the end here I've just got prayer potions and my food, because obviously you're going to need to eat at certain points throughout the fight. But prayer potions, not that necessary. I didn't use prayer throughout the majority of the fight, so that's only if you're going to be using prayer. Now, I'm going to move on and talking to you about when you're going to use the different abilities at the different special attacks. So I'll talk about the different special attacks and then what you should do with them. The first special attack that everyone encounters when they go into a fight with Nomad is when he says, "Let's make things interesting." He'll throw down a series of mines around you, and if you ever run over any of those mines, you'll get dealt for around 5k damage. And you'll have your run energy reduced to 0. So basically entirely avoid that one. Just stay exactly where you are, continue attacking Nomad. You can't run away at this point in the fight because you will probably die. On the next of his special attacks, he'll shout out, "Let's see how well your senses serve you," and then there will be 4 versions of Nomad that spawn. None of them really cause that much in the way of damage, but essentially go around attacking them. If you attack the one that isn't Nomad, then it will teleport away, but if you attack the one that is Nomad, all the others will teleport away and you'll continue your fight with Nomad. The next of his special attacks is when he says, "You cannot hide from my wrath." In the past, then the situation would be you've got to try and run away from and hide behind a pillar to avoid any damage you take. But now the damage doesn't seem to occur at all, so you essentially don't take any damage. I think it's glitched, but in the future, if this glitch does get fixed, then basically try and run behind a pillar. If you can't, then try and activate Resonance as he's about to cast the spell. Possibly the most lethal of his special attacks is when he says, "Let's see how much punishment you can take." He'll teleport you into the center of the arena and freeze you there so you cannot escape, and he'll basically start charging up a spell and then slam it into you, and it will cause you around 99% of your maximum life points. It's kind of outrageous how much damage you receive, but you can avoid it. Now, when he starts casting the spell, you'll notice that it's quite like a sort of a high-pitched sound in the background. This is if you're using sound. And essentially it goes lower for a bit and then the sound gets more high pitched, and then when it starts to develop even more, then he's about to cast the spell, and then you activate Resonance right there and then, and you'll be protected entirely from the damage and healed probably around 4k damage, which is really nice amount to get healed. On the other hand, if you're not using sound, then as he starts to move forward, then he'll obviously, that's when he's about to cast the spell, then you've got 6 seconds, you can click that button and then you have 6 seconds of immunity from it and it will heal you that amount of damage. If you're not using Resonance, then it's really quite difficult to survive this. You want to either use Barricade to provide you with 100% damage protection, or you just want to eat up basically so you avoid it entirely. So that's basically if it's still on cooldown or whatever, anything like that. Now, when Nomad gets down to a quarter health, 2 things happen. The first time he goes down to a quarter health, he'll say that you seem to be tougher than I thought, and he'll basically heal back up to half health. So that essentially makes hit points a lot higher than they actually are. And the second time you get him down into quarter health, then he'll go into berserker mode and he'll start attacking you really rapidly, about the same speed as thrown equipment. So what you want to do there is activate any sort of defensive abilities. If you've got enough adrenaline, then it might be worthwhile activating Barricade if you've got the high enough defense level, as this gives you 10 seconds of 100% protection, which gives you enough time to eat up any food and whatnot, and to prepare for like the later part of the fight. Now, what you can do, you can activate Deflect or Protect from melee, and it will reduce 50% of the damage. It doesn't seem to be immensely effective though, but it can be useful to activate that, or any sort of offensive pres. What you want to do here is just deal as much damage as you can. So if you've got anything like a Spirit Kite familiar, then use its scrolls there, because the damage it will cause will really help protect you against that sort of damage. And then once you've finished that bit, once he's died there, then you've completed the boss fight. Unless of course you're doing the double Nomad, in which case you've got to do it all over again. So that's just a simple breakdown of all the special attacks and everything. So if you combine all of those together, then you should be able to take him on. And hopefully this is enough information to provide you with a successful kill against Nomad. If you are having trouble, then feel free to contact me and I'll be able to like give you any sort of tips or anything. I'm not the best PvMer, but I like to think that I can kill Nomad. I did it earlier this morning, and I would say it's generally a lot easier in the evolution of combat. So if you were having trouble before, then now is probably the time to try it again. If you have enjoyed this video, then feel free to subscribe for sort of any more videos on the evolution of combat, for taking on bosses and whatever. And if you'd like to, you can follow me on Twitter. If you'd like to ask any questions, I'll leave my Twitter link in the description. Thank you very much all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.